Welcome to A Delhi Love, Ishq Mohabbat Pyar, the podcast that treats Delhiwalas to captivating conversations on living and loving all things Delhi. Delhi is not just a place, it's a state of mind, an attitude that leaves a mark on everyone who visits or calls it home. I'm Yasmin Kidwai, your host, a documentary filmmaker, former municipal councillor, and at heart, the quintessential Delhi girl. I love how Delhi is both old and new at the same time. I value its history and heritage and love exploring the new aspects of the city we share. I'm no expert, but I grew up in the gullies here, enjoyed public service here, and just like you, shared a deep passion for Delhi's enigmatic soul. Together, let's embrace the delightful contradictions that make Delhi the city it is. After all, around every corner, there must be 1,000 dastans to share in this megacity of a million conversations. I've always felt like I know Khusro, but then I discover something new about him, and it's an eye-opener, a complete surprise. It's like I never knew him at all. Khusro's connection to Delhi is similar. Delhi ought to know him. He's so much a part of Delhi's calendar. From college functions to weddings, evenings are planned around Sufi or Qawwali nights, where they sing Khusro's lyrics and perform his music. But how much do we really know of him, even though our syncretic culture owes a lot to Khusro and his spiritual mentor, Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, for whom he wrote many of our favorite Qawwalis. Some even say Khusro ought to be as famous as Shakespeare for just his poetry. In effect, Khusro's literary work created language that allows for people to come together and converse across many divides, both in his time and ours. Truly fitting the description of Renaissance man and genius, the 13th century polyglot was a Sufi poet, musician, scholar, and is considered the inventor of the sitar and tabla. Khusro rightly fascinates musicians, poets, writers, and art lovers over 7 centuries later. Today, scholar, researcher, Khusro expert, and award-winning filmmaker Yousuf Saeed is here to help us unravel the mystique of Amir Khusrau. Yousuf is an independent filmmaker and author based in New Delhi. He has directed the famous science show for television Turning Point and acclaimed films like Khayal Darpan and Khusro Darya Prem Ka. He is also one of the founders of Tasveer Ghar, a digital network of South Asian popular visual culture.
A lot of historians have doubted whether Amir Khusrau was a Sufi or not. If you go behind Humayun's tomb, there is a little shrine which is called the Chilla of Nizamuddin. So his house is just next to that. So the Sufis see the death as a happy moment. People claim hundreds of works, but actually, again, if you look at the authentic works which have been authenticated by the scholars and historians, they find 9 volumes of poetry and prose which are authentic, and these are all Persian. Qawwali is not just a Sufi song, Qawwali is just a musical genre. Anything you can sing in a Qawwali. You can even sing romantic poetry, you can sing funny poetry, all kinds of poetry has been played in that. Like he would go somewhere and he would recite a doha or just a couplet, and people will remember and then they will pass it on.
So welcome, Yousuf. How should I introduce you? Filmmaker, author, and one of Tasveer Ghar's principles, like Khusro, the man we are going to be talking about today. You yourself have done a lot of different things.
Yes, thanks. Well, I started as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, and that's been my major part of the career. But I also went into academic research and writing and a lot of documentation. So as part of that, I have, explored literature, history, cultural history, especially. So sometimes I make films, but I also do writing and research.
So how did you get interested in Khusro?
Well, I began my career more with science, actually. Many years ago in 1990s, we began with a science series called Turning Point on Doordarshan.
Yes.
So, and I was really interested in science filmmaking and science popularization. So I was doing that, but after that I when you are working as a documentary filmmaker, you have to do all kinds of subjects, to to earn your living. You are ready to work on any subject. But literature and poetry was my interest right from the beginning. So I and another colleague of mine, we thought of Amir Khusrau, and we started working on it. And it was a big sea of knowledge, where you just dive into it, and there is so much to learn, so much to explore. So I became interested, and
So you went into it to learn something or to make something?
Well, to make a film.
In mind?
It was definitely a film. There was a series of documentaries for Doordarshan we did in 95, 96. We applied for, we wrote a proposal and we applied for a film, and we got it from Doordarshan. This was a time when DD3 had started, there was a third channel. They were more interested in culture, arts, and those kind of subjects. So we were lucky to have got that. And through that, it was a long journey. Meeting people, reading a lot of literature, reading history, visiting places, visiting monuments, and so on. So it was a holistic kind of an experience exploring Amir Khusrau and his times. So the film, we were able to make the films for Doordarshan, but the journey didn't stop there. I continued working on the subject. I did more research. I did some writing. And in fact, after that Doordarshan film, many years later...
This was one film or a series?
No, this was a series of 4 films, 4 half-an-hour films. Yeah. No, this was a series on Khusro.
Oh, four
films, 4 parts on Khusro.
And that was clearly not enough.
Yeah, that was not enough, definitely. So I continued working on that, and a few years recently, I made another film on Khusro, which is a kind of a docudrama, and this was done as part of the project which was being done by Aga Khan Trust, around Nizamuddin Dargah and Humayun's tomb and all. So they asked me to make a film. So I made a film based on my research, which was, as I said, docudrama. So I involved some Dastan Goi also in it. We involved this artist named Ankit Chadha, who sadly passed away. He and another person. So we explored Amir Khusrau through him. This film was called Khusro Darya Prem Ka. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was an very interesting kind of a modern day exploration of Khusro, how people of today can explore Khusro and Delhi, heritage of Delhi.
And this was, what was the duration of it?
This was about 40 minutes long.
And where would this be available?
You can watch it on YouTube. It's available. One can share the link.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Khusro wore many hats. He was a soldier. He was at the court of about, I think, 10 kings, if I'm not
mistaken. About 7 kings.
He was a Sufi poet, a music maestro. How did these different varied roles influence his artistic expressions? We also do so many different things, and it's difficult sometimes to put yourself in one. But he was so varied. All he was doing. Did they influence his artistic
Yes,
vision?
Definitely. You see, in order to understand Khusro, you have to understand the time he was born in. This was the time, 13th, 14th century, which was a very crucial time in the history of India, especially the cultural history of India, because there's a large number of influx of people from Central Asia at that time. The Mongol invasions, Genghis Khan's invasion had devastated much of Central Asia. So a lot of people were coming to escape from Mongol invasions into India, because India was a safe kind of a haven.
India always had that.
Yeah, it was a safe haven. In fact, Mongols could not really enter India because of, in fact, the Delhi Sultanate kings like Alauddin Khilji. So this was a time of cultural confluence, the culture and arts and music and language of Central Asia and Iran was coming to India, and people were interacting with the Indians. And so a new kind of culture, a new kind of language and cultural idioms were being born. And so Khusro is very central in that cultural confluence, because first of all, he's very talented. Right from his childhood, he turned out to be a great poet. He started writing.
He was a prodigy.
Yeah, he was a prodigy. So he was writing poetry. And in his times, if you want to become a good, if you want to follow a good career, so the best way is to become a poet, because you will get a job in a court. So he got a job in the court of the son of Balban, one of the kings. That was his first job, and from that onwards, he got several jobs. So about 7 different kings he was employed with. Most importantly, Alauddin Khilji and Ghayasuddin Tughlaq. These were the great kings of that time. And the most interesting part is that all these kings were actually fighting against each other. They were almost killing each other, but they continued to keep Amir Khusro in their courts because of his talent and because of his language.
This was a time, of great intrigue and treachery and stuff. But still, it's remarkable that 7 different kings kept him on in his without doubting his loyalty to
I mean, Alauddin Khilji actually murdered his own uncle to come to the throne. So first, Amir Khusro was working with his uncle and writing, praises about him, and now he's working with Alauddin Khilji and writing praises about him. So it's a very interesting. It's like a career of a, even today, like a journalist or diplomat would do that for whoever
from all
is.
Standard 7 is
7 is quite a lot, and he survived because many of those kings were killing each other, killing the entire families, but he survived. But I think for his survival, there are many other factors, his association with Nizamuddin Aulia, I think, is a very important factor in his life.
Nizamuddin Aulia was not known to be part of any king's court.
Definitely.
And he was in fact against that. And yet Amir Khusro was there.
Yes. So he played a very, very, very crucial role in this dynamic between the Sufis and the kings. And both of them knew that his talent is what they can use. So, for example, his talent is being used by the kings for writing poetry, for writing all the chronicles. And at the same time, when he comes to the Sufi shrine, his talent as a musician, as a poet, is being used there also. So he's playing a very, very delicate, tightrope kind of a walk between these two institutions.
Do you think Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia could recognize that he could use his talent to...
Definitely. People, a lot of historians have doubted whether Amir Khusro was a Sufi or not. This is a question which many people ask. And in order to become a Sufi in those days, or even today, you have to be initiated into the Sufi order, which they call the Bait Lena, to kind of Bait Karna, as in you have to be initiated into that order. So they say that he did not take a Bait with Nizamuddin Aulia. Officially, he was not a Sufi, but emotionally he was much closer to Nizamuddin Aulia than anybody else, because Nizamuddin Aulia realized that he can play this role between the king's court and the Sufi shrine, and so in a way there was a diplomatic kind of a relationship he was playing between the two.
So you are saying that he didn't actually take the Bait to become a part of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia's Chisti order, but there is this very interesting story that I've heard that he almost he tested Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia before joining his order. That was not a formal introduction. I believe he wrote something.
So he this was early in his life as a young person. Amir Khusro was supposed to have gone to meet Nizamuddin Aulia, but he didn't enter the Khanqa. He sat outside, and he imagined, he thought of a couplet in which he said that you are a king, and if a pigeon comes to your palace, he becomes a falcon, and I am a poor man. I have come to meet you. Should I come inside or should I leave? This is a couplet which he thought, and he tested. And immediately the servant of Nizamuddin Aulia, Iqbal, he came out and he looked for him and he said that, are you that Turk? So Nizamuddin Aulia has sent you this couplet saying that if you are a learned man, if you know the secrets of the self, then you come inside so that we can sit and talk. Otherwise, if you are just a stupid person, then leave. This is a couplet which Nizamuddin Aulia sent from inside, and he realized, and then he went inside. So definitely, I mean, you see, there is a very emotional relationship, a very friendly relationship between the two, but formally probably he did not.
Why do you say that? That he formally did?
Well, I'm saying this based on what the historians have found, because the historians have said that in all the chronicles, in all the historical sources, we don't see any evidence that he actually took the bayat with Nizamuddin Aulia, although he's involved in everything. He's involved in the listening of the music, in the sama, and everything else. So actually there are two ways of looking at it. There are two interpretations of this. The Sufis think that he was a Sufi. There is no question about that, but the scholars, the Persian scholars or the historians have a doubt about this. Amir Khusro's personality is today divided into several sections based on who is looking at them. So if the Persian scholars and the historians are looking at him, they want to be sure about the most authentic sources of history. So they will only stick to those, whereas there are many other sources of history which may not be authentic, which are very popular history. So according to the popular histories, he was a legend, he was a Sufi, all those things. I mean, the reason why people come to the shrine and first they visit Amir Khusro's shrine and then they go to Nizamuddin Aulia's shrine. So for ordinary people, he was a Sufi, he was a saint.
Is there a comparable figure in world history, like him, with all the numerous hats he wore and his success in almost each and every one of them? Is there anyone comparable you can?
I don't know really, because when you look around, you look in all the other countries, you see that there are very few places where there is so much confluence of cultures and languages happening. So it's very difficult to find one artist or one writer who would be writing in so many languages and
developing
languages and developing musical genres and music and so on. And there's so many things. I really don't know. Maybe if we come to more recent, times in 20th century or something, people in cinema, for example, I'm sure there are people who are multifaceted, multi-talented, Charlie Chaplin or somebody like that, who
in one
realm. Yeah. So I really can't think of any. I really can't think of anybody who would be so multifaceted and so.
Amir Khusro has often been compared to Shakespeare.
Yeah, you could say that. But again, Shakespeare, I mean, of course, he's a great writer, language. One thing, theater and language, and he was developing that. But I really don't know. I mean, you can compare even with Shakespeare.
He himself was the son of a Turk, and an Indian mother.
Yes,
so
yes.
I think that kind of when you talk of his own personality might have made a lot of difference.
Yeah, that is what the most interesting part is, that he is a result of a marriage of two different cultures, completely different cultures. And in fact, his mother's family is a Hindu family. So his nana was a Hindu. His name was Rawate Arz. In fact, after his father died, Amir Khusro's father and parents died, he was brought up by the Nana, who was actually a Hindu, Rawate Arz, and mother was a convert to Islam. So obviously he has that, and because the family came from Eta, a place called Patiali, so it's a very, very rooted into Indian culture and society, and he grew up in some of those areas also. So from the mother's side, he has got all the pure Indian culture and language and idioms, and from the father's side, he's got the Persian and Turkish and
these kind of marriages were common at that point of time.
Yeah, because that's why
there was
so much confluence happening between the two. So it was definitely.
So how did Amir Khusro's devotion or relationship to Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia and to the Sufi order, how did it influence his musical creations and lead to the development of Qawwali in the Indian subcontinent?
Yes. You see, in his poetry or in any kind of mystical poetry, the passion is very important. You have to put a passion. That is how things, and much of Amir Khusro's poetry is actually all about passion. His ghazals are so passionate. So, and this is what the Sufis also want, because the Sufis, in their spiritual experience, they want some kind of stimulation, some kind of stimulus, whether it's poetry or music or just any kind of literary composition. So, and right from the beginning, he was a prodigy. He was writing such great poetry, and people realized his talent not only in the king's courts, but also in the Sufi circles. So he was a very well sought after person. Everybody wanted him to come and recite poetry, and not only recite what he had composed in the past. His the greatest gift that he had was that he would recite on the spur of the moment. Like you ask him something and he would recite. There are many incidents about how, like, somebody said that, okay, I will give you 4 words, you compose a poetry on these 4 words, and he would immediately come up with something like that. There is a Hindi Hindi couplet about that he was passing by somewhere and he was thirsty and he saw 4 women who were drawing water from the well, and he said that, oh, I'm thirsty, please give me water. So these women, they realized, oh, you are Amir Khusrau, so we heard about your dohas and geets. First you have to give us a doha or a geet, only then we will give you water. And so all these 4 women, they said that, we will give you 1 word each, you have to compose a doha with that. So one woman said kheer, and one said charkha, and one said kutta, and one said dhol. So you mix all these 4 words and make a couplet. So he said, kheer pakai jatan se, charkha diya jalaye, aya kutta kha gaya, tu baiti dhol bajaye. So, and they were really pleased, and then they gave him water. Now, some scholars have taken couplets like this, and they have even come up with Sufi interpretations out of these. So they say that actually a couplet like this has a Sufi interpretation. Kheer pakai jatan se means that you worked hard and prepared something. And then charkha diya jalai means that you exhibited it. Whatever you produced, whatever you have done in your life, if you just show it off to the people, then somebody will come and take it away, and then you will just be beating the drum, something like that. So these couplets have Sufi meanings also in a way.
So coming to the Qawwali, he's regarded as the father of Qawwali. What was Sufi devotional music like before the Qawwali, or before his time? He was the Qawwali there, or did he contribute to the development, or was it invented?
See, his contribution to music, there are a lot of debates, there are a lot of arguments about that. On one hand, you have the traditional musicians, the gharana musicians or the qawwals. They make all kinds of claims. They say that he invented this qawwali and khayal and this and that and so many things. But if you look at the authentic historical accounts, you will find very little evidence of all that. But one thing which you will definitely find in all his Persian text is that he was very much interested in music, and he's doing a lot of experiments with music, because he had one job in the king's court, that he had to produce some kind of an evening entertainment for the king every evening, which means that you have to produce a ghazal or a few ghazals every day, new ghazals every day, and compose them to music, set them to music, get your orchestra, get the singer to sing, and then perform it in the evening. He was doing it every day for some kings, which means that and what music would you use? Because the kings have come from Central Asia. They are familiar with the Persian language, but they love the Indian music. They really like Indian music. So they used to say that, okay, you sing a ghazal in Persian, but it should be set to Indian music. Now, in order to set something to Indian music, you have to know Indian music. So which means that he knew, and he had said that I know all the instruments, Central Asian instruments as well as Indian instruments. I know how to tune them, I know how to correct them, and I know how to set my poetry to music. So he was doing that, which means that he had a great knowledge of all these things. And he was actually even teaching and training the musicians in that. So, I mean, the qawwals say that there were some musicians, some qawwals who were trained by him. There is somebody called Mia Samat, who is the ancestor of the Delhi Gharana. I mean, they believe that. So Mia Samat was one of the disciples of Amir Khusro, and from him, his family was called Qawwal Bacche. So this is called Qawwal Bachcha Gharana, and they have been following that tradition. And Mia Samat was used to sing the Qawwali for Nizamuddin Aulia and all the Chishti saints. And then there are other musicians, singers, and instrumentalists from Central Asia who Amir Khusro was dealing with, and he was training them to do this music. So it was really a time of this hybrid kind of a music where he's mixing Indian music with Central Asian music, and also obviously when you're dealing with instruments like string instruments or percussion instruments, then you have to say, okay, you have to change it to a little bit to suit the music, to suit the poetry. So a lot of experiments he's doing, and he's written all that. Now today people claim that he was the inventor of sitar, but we are not sure 100%. He definitely has tinkered around with a lot of instruments. But the sitar which we see today is a very recent thing. It was probably developed in the late Mughal period.
And the tabla,
tabla also, it was developed in the late Mughal period. But definitely there were instruments like that.
So, when we were talking about this, this interplay of history and, legend.
Yeah,
Khusro, and you said there are both. So in the terms of the sitar and tabla, you think it's all legend? And
definitely the musicians, the musicologists and the scholars who have worked on it, they have not found any evidence that sitar was the current sitar that we have today was invented by Amir Khusro. He may have invented some instrument which was developed further in the later times. I mean, in his times you have sitar means three string instruments, so sehtar. But then there was saat tar, there was panch tar, or there were ek tar. There were many instruments at that time, and he talks about them. Those instruments were coming from Central Asia, and some were available here. So and the sizes also, like today you have a very long sitar, but in those times there were smaller instruments also. There is a smaller sitar which comes from Iran. So there was rubab, which is still played in Kashmir and Afghanistan and those places. So he mentions rubab. He mentions many other instruments in those times.
Delhi has always welcomed people, and we are known for the different cultures have come in, and it's kind of developed into this Dilli ka adab. So Khusro, coming from a syncretic background, how responsible is he? Because he clearly must have valued both the cultures he came from, wrote in a language which people could understand. How much is he responsible for the syncretic culture, or the Dilli ka jo culture hai, which we say?
See, Delhi has been a kind of a melting pot for so many years, so many centuries, right from the Delhi Sultanate time. And in fact, there was a time when Delhi was compared with other Islamic cities like Baghdad and Kabul and all those places. So in that line of Islamic, I mean, it was considered an Islamic city actually, because you still have so many monuments, so much heritage here. So, but the roots of that culture were being sown at that time, I think 13th, 14th century, because when you have so many kings and their palaces and the whole architecture which is being built, so along with the architecture, you also have other kinds of material culture. You have the dresses, what people wear, what people eat, and how people greet each other. So definitely it was a time of the evolution of all this culture. I'm not sure how much Amir Khusro is directly responsible for the evolution of this culture, but the entire culture, all the sultans and all the other people are responsible.
So I think that is being product of this culture, he probably would have had some influence on it.
Definitely. But let's also remember the fact that because Delhi has had these 7 different dynasties, there are these 7 shahers of Delhi. So different dynasties. So after the Sultan, the Delhi Sultanate passed on, many other sultans came, many other dynasties came. There was the Lodhis, the Sayyids, and then the Mughals, and then the British. So each of them have left their own influence on the city and the culture of the city. And a lot of things disappear also. I mean, even today we know that a lot of things from the Mughal period have disappeared. So over the 700 years, obviously a lot of things have disappeared. So I really don't know how much of that the real culture of 700 years ago survives today. But because right now what we see as Old Delhi or Shahjahanabad is actually the Mughal city. It's not the Sultanate city. Sultanate city was actually in the south of Delhi. So the Tughlaqabad, Mehroli, Siri Fort, and those were those areas, and Haus Khas. That was the city of that time. So if you really want to see the city, and obviously most of those areas there is nobody living there. The only place which is still surviving is the Mehroli. So you can say that Mehroli is the original, in a way, city of Amir Khusro's time, or maybe some parts of Haus Khas. In the Haus Khas village, if you go, there are some villages of that time.
But where the Dargah is, Hazrat Nizamuddin, this is also part of his area. This was Ghayaspur.
Yeah, Ghayaspur, but Ghayaspur, it was not really populated area. Actually, this was a graveyard. It was more of a graveyard for many centuries. So Ghayaspur is also probably named after Ghayasuddin Tughlaq, because he built the mosque around the Dargah. So where the Dargah of Nizamuddin Auliya is, that was not where he lived. He lived in another place called, if you go behind Humayun's tomb, there is a little shrine which is called the Chilla of Nizamuddin. Yeah. So that is, so his house is just next to that. There is a building at the corner of Humayun's tomb. There's a building where there's a room where Nizamuddin Auliya lived, and that was on the facing the bank of the river, the Jamna. Yeah. So that's where he lived.
I was reading that Khusro he's produced almost hundreds and hundreds of works of poetry, and some still exist. What would you recommend for somebody from this generation to read, to be able to understand?
See, first of all, Amir Khusro's most of the works. First of all, I mean, people claim hundreds of works, but actually, again, if you look at the authentic works which have been authenticated by the scholars and historians, they find 9 volumes of poetry and prose which are authentic, and these are all Persian, which he wrote for all these kings, Ghayasuddin Tughlaq and Alauddin Khilji and Bughra Khan and Qayqbad and so many of these people. Now, unfortunately, they're all in Persian, and they are in Persian of 700 years ago. So it's not today's Persian. Like today, the Persian which is taught in the different universities in India, it is more closer to what the Persian you find in Iran, for example. But this Persian was what you will find probably in Afghanistan or even further in Central Asia of that time. So it's very difficult for anybody who doesn't know Persian to follow all these works. His Hindavi or Hindi poetry was not compiled by anybody at that time. It was all remembered through people's oral memory, oral tradition. It has been passed through the generation from...
So it's not been written down?
It's not been written down. It's only in the late 19th century that somebody compiled them, or early 20th century. There is a book called Jawahir Khusravi, which has all the Hindi compilation, but that's very late. Then somebody also found, this scholar named Gopichand Narang, he found one manuscript from Lucknow. Not Lucknow. This was taken from Lucknow by a German scholar, and he was taken it to Germany, and it was found in Berlin. So that is the latest, or you could say the earliest manuscript of Hindi Pahelis, the riddles of Amir Khusro. Before that, before 19th century, there is no book which was compiled.
So then is there any dispute about what he's written and what he's not written?
Of course, there is a dispute. There is a dispute because you see the scholars who who depend only on textual sources, they have a very limited way of looking at these things. They say that, okay, we will trust only those books which are authentic. We will not trust the oral history and all. So they say that, Hindi poetry to sara Hindi mein to sara oral history mein aa raha hai, so we cannot trust whether he actually wrote it down or not. But he himself says that I have written Hindi poetry. In his Persian works, he had said that I am writing Hindi poetry, but I am gifting it to my friends. And he says that if, in the middle of his career, he said that so far I have written 3 volumes of Persian poetry, but if I had written my Hindi poetry also in the book form, they would also come in 3 volumes. So he says that. He says that, but he said that I did not compile them. I just gifted it to friends. Like he would go somewhere and he would recite a doha or just a couplet, and people will remember and then they will pass it on. And this was passed on the generation. So imagine, when somebody says that 100 books he wrote, maybe he wrote that much, he composed that much, but he just gave it to people's memory, and it was not compiled, for all this time.
So in this context, where does the ghazal fall into his story? Did his intervention help to create, to refine it, to redefine it? What is his contribution to the ghazal?
See, as a poet, he was writing in all kinds of genres of poetry, especially Persian poetry. So Persian has many genres. The biggest genre that he was writing in was Masnavi. So Masnavi is a very long poem, a descriptive poem which describes some incidents in the life, or describes a story. For example, Laila Majnu is a Masnavi. So, or any other Shiri Farhad could be a Masnavi, or the story of a king. How the king goes and goes on a war and wins some land or something like that. So he has written almost, I think, 6-7 Masnavis for different kings. So those are one kind of genre. Then there are Qasidas. Qasidas are again long poems which are in praise of a person. Then comes the ghazal. Now ghazal is a short poem, like maybe 7-8 couplets or 10 couplets. Now what he does is that in the middle of a Masnavi, he inserts these ghazals. Like he's describing something that the king Alauddin Khilji was having his court, and in his court something was being decided, and then suddenly the evening happened, and then the musicians were brought in and they started singing a ghazal, and this was the ghazal they sang. So he would insert a ghazal. So, and those ghazals are very beautiful, they're very musical, and they're very passionate. They're basically love poetry, romantic poetry. So definitely his ghazals are very passionate, and they're huge in number. Like if he wrote 10 Masnavis, you will find 100 ghazals probably comparably. And really beautiful ghazals. And his heart is there in those ghazals. He's really putting his passion and heart in those ghazals. And they're very musical, because they've been set to music for that time. So they're very musical, and many of those ghazals have been remembered by the qawwals, and they still sing some of those ghazals in the Sufi
And
shrines.
in the same vein, it's also said that he created the khayal form of music, which is really the zenith and epitome of music that you can reach. Is it coming from the Sufi tradition? Because you kind of get lost in the khayal and this thing. Is it coming from there that he was able to develop this?
Yeah, definitely. There are many genres, like apart from Qawwali. And Qawwali itself has many smaller kind of styles. For example, Qawl, Qalbana, Tarana. These are some of the terms which the musicians use. And interestingly, many of these genres, the lyrics are again mixed language. So they half of it would be in Persian and the other half would be in Hindi, or some part would be in Arabic. He's even taken quotations from the Prophet's hadith. Prophet Muhammad's hadith has been used. For example, the famous Qawwali, which Qawwals sing, Man kunto Maula, fa Aliyun Maula. It's actually a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. in which he says that whoever considers me as their master, Ali is your master too. So a lot of emphasis on Hazrat Ali is given. Similarly, many other quotations from the Quran, from the Hadith, which have been used by the Qawwals. And what they do, they take a quotation from the Hadith and then they mix some musical sounds in it. So, for example, tarana, bol, tananana, like sounds like that have been added along with the Hadith or along with the religious poetry.
And these sounds have come from Amir Khusrau.
Yeah, they have been come from Amir Khusrau through the oral tradition, of course.
Yes,
of course. But if you read some of his poetry, some of his ghazals, you will see they're so musical that they actually have. So, for example, there are stories which people have remembered. For example, he was going in the market and he saw, there are these people who we call them dhunia. Dhunia is basically a guy who does the cotton, जो रुई को धुनते हैं. तो उनका एक instrument होता है जिससे वो रुई को धुनते हैं, टंग करके आवाज आती है. So that's also like an instrument. So he was going in the market and he saw one dhunia who was doing this carding of the cotton, and Amir Khusrau's disciples were also with him, and they asked him कि अगर आप ये जो धुनिया जो अपने इंस्ट्रूमेंट से जो आवाज निकाल रहा है, अगर इसको आप पोएट्री में डालेंगे तो कैसा होगा. So he actually heard that sound and he started singing some Persian words, dartan dartan dar ah dartan dartan, something like that. So which was the sound of that instrument, but it also means something. Dartan dartan means that come into my heart, something like that. So he's fond of doing these things. He hears some sound and he converts it into poetry, or converts poetry into some kind of a sound. So there are many stories like that, which
and clearly then there would be more in oral tradition to find.
Yes.
He also contributed to the to the fusion of the Persian Arabic influences into Hindustan classical music. Film music is where this kind of plays out. So where would people have experienced Khusro's work without even realizing that they're listening to Khusro's work in Hindi films?
Actually, Qawwali is one major genre which has been used in India. It's a very popular genre. People hear them all the time. And Indian films have used qawwalis a lot right from the beginning, right from 1940s. Qawwalis have been used in the movies. So, and qawwali, let me tell you, qawwali is not just a Sufi song. Qawwali is just a musical genre. Anything you can sing in a qawwali. You can even sing romantic poetry. You can sing funny poetry. All kinds of poetry has been played in that. But a lot of Sufi lyrics have been used in the cinema qawwalis. And Amir Khusrau's lyrics have also been used right from the beginning. In fact, if you have seen the film Mirza Ghalib from 1954, there is a qawwali in it which is being sung in the shrine of Nizamuddin Aulia, although they have made a set of the Nizamuddin Aulia's dargah. And there is a qawwali happening which has been sung by Muhammad Rafi and one artist named Bande Ali Khan. So qawwali has existed from there, and a lot of qawwalis have been put in the shrines, and Amir Khusrau's lyrics have also been used. For example, this film called Junoon, which starts with the Aaj Rang Hai, E Ma Rang Hai. In fact, this qawwali Aaj Rang Hai, we were talking about initially, first meeting of Nizamuddin Aulia with Amir Khusrau, and this exchange of the couplets. So the qawwals say that it is that first meeting from which, when Amir Khusrau came back to his home and his mother was there, and he was so ecstatic that he sang this qawwali, Aaj Rang Hai, E Ma Rang Hai, as in that I have now acquired the color of Nizamuddin Aulia, because he's telling the mother that, I have come back from this. Aaj Rang Hai, E Ma Rang Hai, Mohe Peer Payo, Nizamuddin Aulia, Jag Ujiyaro, Jagat Ujiyaro, all these things, like his eyes have opened suddenly because he met Nizamuddin Aulia.
There is also a Khusro character appears in this film Padmavat by Sanjay Leela Bhansali, and in fact even Khusro's poem on Basant, Sakal Ban
Phool Rahi Sarson. Yeah,
it's come into this series, the Magnificent
Hira Mandi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Khusro has been used. In fact, I have been doing a study of cinema qawwalis, and I have over the years collected about 800 cinema qawwalis. You can imagine that no, not Khusro, not just Khusro, okay. Just qawwalis, any kind of qawwalis which has been sung in the 800. Yes, over the last 80 years, starting from 1936 till now, and in these 800 qawwalis, I would say that at least 100 of them are some way or the other connected to Amir Khusro, or his lyrics have been used. Aaj Rang Hai Ima has been used a lot. Man Kunto Maula has also been used a lot. Chhap Tilak Sab Chhini Re Mose Naina Milai Ke, that has been used a lot. So many of these, and
that's probably one of the most
the most famous qawwali, Chhap Tilak Sab Chhini. And the interesting part is that Amir Khusro, in many of his qawwali lyrics, is using this female, point of view, protagonist. Yeah, so he is the female, he is the beloved, the beloved, and the lover is either Nizamuddin Aulia or the god himself. So and this using female point of view is actually the part of bhakti tradition also. In the whole Krishna and Gopi and that tradition also, the same poetry has been used. So it's very interesting how the Sufis use imagine themselves as the female, and
why is that?
As I said, it's coming from the bhakti tradition, from the Krishna and the whole tradition of that. Even a lot of bhajans use that. So there is an interesting part in this 13th, 14th century, when the people were coming from Central Asia, a lot of them were Sufis and saints and sages. And when they came to India, they interacted with the Indian sadhus and yogis and all these people. And through their interaction, because they were curious about each other's spiritual practices, so they wanted to learn from each other. And through that interaction, a lot of very interesting things happened. Ideas were exchanged. Even Nizamuddin Aulia, there is an incident with Nizamuddin Aulia was inside his room, and 6 sadhus came from somewhere because they wanted to meet him, and they were outside waiting for him, and the servant went inside and said that so and so has come. And Nizamuddin Aulia said, "Acha, so and so has come. Acha, so that guy has been sitting inside a cave for last 40 years, and that guy has been sitting meditating in a cave in last 10 years. So he knew all those people, and these were people who were meditating for years and years."
How did you know this?
He just imagined. This was his spiritual power. He imagined, and they knew each other. That's why these sadhus have also come, because they wanted to interact with him, and they would sit down and they would interact that, okay, what is your way of meditation? This is my way of meditation. How do you do this? So a lot of this language was passed, and that's why you have a lot of Hindu texts were translated into Persian by many Sufis, and similarly the Sufi texts were translated, and they exchanged all these things. And a lot of poetry has been written by poets in Hindi or Braj Bhasha or many of these dialects. So you have, and these are Sufi long Sufi poems which have been written in Hindi or other dialects. For example, Madhu Malati and even Padmavat actually was a Sufi poem written by Malik Muhammad Jaisi, and many other poems which have been written. So
did this kind of conference give rise to Urdu, because he's called the father of Urdu literature?
Definitely. I would say that Urdu, the rise of Urdu is actually Sufis have played a big role in the rise of Urdu. Many scholars have worked on this, and they have said that the early Urdu is the product of really because Sufis wanted to give out their message. They wanted to send their message to the people. They wanted to interact with the ordinary people of India, and so they had to use the language of the people. and the language of the people, the simplest language which anybody can understand on the street, is that Hindvi or Urdu. At that time it was not called Urdu, it was called Hindvi. And Amir Khusrau says that, I know all the languages which are around my place, like Delhi. If the Delhi is the center, he says the my language is Hindvi, and all around there is Punjabi, there is Kashmiri, and there is all these languages he defines. But he says that mine is the language which is spoken here. He also talks about Sanskrit, but he says Sanskrit is only understood by the Brahmins of this region. So he knows the languages, and he uses the language of the people.
And he develops this further.
Yeah, he develops it. Definitely.
So he was one of the elite, right? He was working in the king's courts, but he is very much loved by the everyday person. And he's also written on patriotism, liberalism, integration, folk life, universal living values.
Yes.
And did this help him to gain a wider audience, or was he, because he was so grounded, that he was automatically writing both these things?
He writes somewhere in Persian, he writes that when I go in front of the king, I have to be so formal. I have to really stand, with my hands tied up, and, I can't say anything. I have to be really formal. But it's only when I get off from that court and I go and mingle with the people, ordinary people, then I really get overjoyed, and I really enjoy interacting with the people of India. So that means that he had this dual life. In one hand, he has to face the king, and like in front of the king, you have to just tie your hand and just stand there.
He enjoyed his interactions.
Yeah. So,
and him being, we were talking about this, having Muslim and Hindu influence in his own life. Do you think it contributed to his writing, and is it one of the factors which we kind of keep trying to decipher, that why Delhi had this syncretic culture? Was it one of the factors which has given us the syncretic culture?
Definitely. Khusro is also controversial in some ways, in the sense that a lot of people say, today especially, people say that he also wrote some things which you can call kind of communal or sectarian at that time. Why? Because he is writing to please his kings. And when the king is going on a campaign to win some land, obviously he's going to fight with the people who are there, and there's going to be war, there's going to be violence. And Amir Khusro has to write the praise of his king, and he has to say the bad things about his enemies. So he's done that. As any court poet would do that. But in the same volume, in the same Masnavi, a few passages later, he talks about he praises India, and he praises the people of India, and he says that, I find it so fascinating, the people of India. And he says that the Hindus, he praises the Hindus. He says that, if you want to learn how to worship, go and learn from the Hindus. They know how to worship. They know how to concentrate in front of their God. They know how to, meditate. And if Islam allowed me, to do that, I would worship like that. And there are a few couplets. Maybe let me remember if I can remember a couplet like that. He says that in Persian, he says that kafire ishqam musalmani mara darkar neest. Kafire ishqam means कि मैं इश्क में काफिर बन गया हूँ. काफिर इश्कम मुसलमानी मरा दरकार नीस्त. मुझे मुसलमानी की जरूरत नहीं है. हर रगे मन तार गुश्ता. रगे मन, जो रग होती है हमारी, वो इतनी टाइट हो गई है. रगे मन तार गुश्ता, तार की तरह से टाइट हो गई है पैशन में, कि हाजते जुन्नार नीस्त. जुन्नार वो होता है जो जनेऊ जो ब्राह्मण पहनते हैं. तो इसे मुझे ब्राह्मण के जनेऊ की जरूरत नहीं है, बिकॉज मेरी हर रग जो है वो इतनी टाइट हो गई है. तो इसे काफिर इश्क़म मुसलमानी, मैं इश्क में काफिर हो गया हूँ. Then later on he says कि खल्क मी गोई के खुसरो बुत परस्ती मी कुनद. दुनिया कहती है कि खुसरो बुत परस्ती करता है, यानी मूर्ति पूजा करता है. आरे आरे मी कुनम, हाँ मैं करता हूँ. बा खल्क आलम कारनीस्त, मुझे लोगों की परवाह नहीं है. So he writes a poetry like that in Persian. So on one hand, he says bad things about the enemies of his kings, but at the same time, he talks about how beautiful India is, how beautiful the people are, how the Brahmins, how much wisdom the Brahmins have, and obviously he must have written, he must have read all those, the Hindu treatises and all those books. So that's how he comes up with all those.
His Urs is celebrated in Delhi, in Nizamuddin, and in May. What impact do you think he's left on the cultural fabric, and how is his legacy very important today?
Yeah, actually, the Urs is it goes by the Islamic calendar, so it's celebrated every 17th of Shawwal, which is actually 17 days after Eid al-Fitr. It keeps changing. So this 17th of Shawwal is actually called Satravi Sharif. Satra. So Satravi Sharif is actually a festival in Delhi, and especially for the people of Old Delhi. And every 17 days after Eid al-Fitr, the people from Old Delhi used to come to Nizamuddin's Dargah, and they used to celebrate. The Urs would happen. There would be food. There would be a lot of celebration, the market, the whole thing. Interesting part is that when the legend of Amir Khusrau and Nizamuddin Aulia happened mostly because they died
around the same time.
At the same, 6 months apart. Yeah, actually. So when Nizamuddin Aulia died, Amir Khusrau was not there in Delhi at that time. When he came back and he heard, and then he was, he read a Hindi doha. When he saw his grave, he read this Hindi doha. गोरी सोवे सेज पर मुख पर डारे केस चल खुसरो घर आपने अब सांझ भई चहुदेस. So he refers to Nizamuddin Aulia as गोरी के सेज पर सो रही है और मुख पर डारे केस, और अब तो शाम हो गई है, या मतलब it's become dark, so now let me go back. तो वो इतना ज़्यादा उससे उनकी मौत से मुतासिर थे कि exactly 6 months later he also died on the same date according to the Islamic calendar. So on the 17th of Shawwal, you have Amir Khusro's Urs, and then exactly 6 months later, I think 17th of Rabiul Awwal, one of the months, is the Urs of Nizamuddin Aulia. So these two big Urses are actually very, very important for the people of Old Delhi. They come and they celebrate them. Now you would ask, why celebrate the death anniversary? It is a time for mourning actually. Why celebrate? So the Sufis see the death as a happy moment, because they have been aspiring all their life to go to the heaven, to meet the beloved. Their real beloved is God, is the Almighty. So they have been aspiring to meet the Almighty. तो जिस दिन किसी सूफी की मौत होती है, उस दिन उनकी शादी होती है, वो कहते हैं. तो उर्स जो वर्ड है, उर्स means the wedding, and urus means the bride. तो एक तरह से वो दुल्हन बन करके और उनको जाना है. So that's why an urs is celebrated.
Can you tell me about the association of Khusro and with Basant? There are many interesting stories around that, and Hazrat Nizamuddin.
Yes. So the Chishti Sufis, these people belong to the Chishti order of Sufis. They had a very popular concept that they would like to integrate with the local culture, the local language wherever they go. And especially the festivals are very important, the local festivals. And one festival, a very colorful festival, which has a big relevance for the Chishti Sufis, is the Basant Panchami. So every year at the time of the spring, when Basant Panchami comes, almost all the Chishti Sufi dargahs, they celebrate Basant. Now, why they celebrate Basant? Because during the time of Nizamuddin Aulia, they say that Nizamuddin Aulia had a favorite nephew. Yeah, his name was Taqiyuddin Nu. He died very early, and Nizamuddin Aulia was very, very sad about him. So, and he used to just sit at the grave of Nu for many days. And Amir Khusro was trying to sort of cheer him up, was thinking of ways to cheer him up. How could he do that? So one day he was just walking on the road and he saw many Hindu women wearing colorful dresses, yellow dresses, and taking flowers in their hands and going somewhere. So he asked them, where are you going? What is so special today? So they said it's Basant Panchami today and we are taking these flowers to the temple. He said, oh, that's a very fascinating concept. He was really fascinated by that. And he said that I also want to take the flowers and all this to my Sufi guru. So he dressed up in a very colorful way and took the flowers, the basant flowers, basically saffron, no, not saffron, but the yellow flowers, mustard flowers. So he went to Nizamuddin Aulia and singing some kind of song, Basanti songs. He went there and Nizamuddin Aulia saw him and he was dressed as a woman. He was dressed as a woman actually. So Nizamuddin Aulia saw and he smiled. After many months, he smiled. So then everybody really enjoyed that. And they started singing the Basant songs and, the whole celebration started. So this was such an important moment that people, the Sufis, even today in the dargahs of Chishti saints, they celebrate Basant. Even today, if you go on Basant Panchami, it's very beautiful.
Everybody should mark it in Delhi in their calendars and try to visit a dargah.
In fact, I made a short film on this a long time ago in 1997. We shot this whole scenario. So we took this Qawwal, Miraj Nizami Qawwal, who's no more now. So he went with us. He goes to every Basant, he goes outside Delhi. He goes to some place in Gurgaon or Haryana where he can pick up some sarson ke phool.
And he gets them?
Yeah, he gets them. Yeah, he goes to some field and he picks up the sarson ke phool and he comes back and before coming to Nizamuddin's Dargah, he goes to Mehroli. He goes to a place called Adchini where Nizamuddin Aulia's mother and sister are buried, and he goes to the Chirag Dilli's dargah. So all these dargahs, he offers these flowers, and then they come to Nizamuddin's dargah, and then the whole procession which takes these flowers and puts them on different shrines, and they sing the Qawwali of Basant. So this is a very colorful festival which happens. So I made this short film. You can find it on YouTube.
On YouTube?
Yeah, Basant.
What's it called?
It's just called Basant. You can search through my name, Basant, and Yousuf Saeed. You will find it.
Yeah. Khusro's free thinking and his often mischievous poetry suggests a unique blend of spirituality and human pursuits, because he was as much of this world since he was holding jobs and fighting and was a warrior also. This playful nature is also reflected in the pahelis, which are. Is it true that he composed these pahelis, or are they? There must be a part of oral tradition, but is there some truth to the pahelis that he is?
No, he's really fond of these riddles. He likes to. He's done riddles in Persian also. So if he has done in Persian and in Persian, he's putting a lot of Hindi words in some of the Persian lyrics. So. And he has taken words which could mean something in Persian and Arabic and Hindi, something. For example, the word nar. Nar in Hindi we say nari, woman. But in Arabic, nar means fire. So he plays with this word nar and nari, like we say nare jahannum, like the fire of the hell. So he takes the fire, nar of Arabic and nar of Hindi, and he plays and he makes a paheli like that. So you have to know both the language, to understand what is being done. That similarly, he has these ghazals which are half part in Hindi and half in Persian. There is a famous ghazal, Zihale Miski Makun Taghaful Doraye Naina Banaye Batiyan. So one half is in Persian and one the other half is a very popular ghazal. Yeah, it has been used in films also.
Yeah, he's also interestingly written about food. And describe food, a lot. And is it, we can use that to create some kind of a material of the construct of the, of the world around him. Are there any foods that he described that we would know or recognize today, or which are?
Yeah, there are a lot of food and cooking methods which have been brought from Central Asia into India. For example, tandoor is something which was not there in India at that time. So tandoor has been brought from Central Asia. And so he talks about naan, for example, and naan was something which was very much here. It was not here, so it was brought. He talks about naan. He talks about different meat dishes. For example, some kind of dumplings which were common in meat dumplings, which were common in Central Asia. And there are different types of salans or curries. There are different types of rice dishes and sweet kind of dishes where you have dry fruits have been put into something. I mean, at that time, the recipes or the cuisine was not very elaborate, very developed, but still they are using, for example, a lot of spices which were available in India but not there in Central Asia. So bringing the meat dishes or meat preparations from Central Asia and mixing the spices from India and preparing some new kind of things.
Well, that's interesting, because there is an interest that he has in food. Because if you're inclined towards spirituality, you think you're not. And his mentor, Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, in fact, he used to be on prolonged fasts stuff like that. So it's a very interesting facet to his personality.
Yeah.
Also, I was, I read somewhere that pan today is associated with the common thing, but he has in fact remarked that it has no place, for only a king can know the taste of what pan really is.
Yeah. He was very fond of pan, and he says that even his Nana, who was a Hindu, Rawat Arz, he was very fond of pan, और वो हर वक्त पान खाया करते थे वो. तो वहीं से पान उनको भी उसकी आदत हुई, और पान के बारे में बहुत कुछ लिखा है. पान की एक पहेली है. मैं आपको लेट मी रिमेम्बर इफ आई कैन रिमेम्बर. एक गुनी ने ये गुण कीना, हरियल पिंजरे में दे दीना. अब हरियल मीन्स तोता. हरियल पिंजरे में दे दीना, देखो जादूगर का कमाल, डाले हरा निकाले लाल. नाउ यू वुड वंडर कि हरियल पिंजरे में डाल दिया और हरा डाला और लाल निकाला, इसका क्या मतलब है? इट्स एक्चुअली पान, कि हरा पान आपने मुंह में डाला और फिर लाल उसका वो निकाला. तो इस तरह की उनकी पहेलियां भी हैं, छोटी छोटी चीजों के बारे में बहुत सारी ऐसी पहेलियां हैं.
So today, I mean, if today's generation and the youth especially had to understand Amir Khusrau, because they the influence is all around, especially for us Delhiites. We know of we hear of him in reference to the Hazrat Nizamuddin Dargah, in reference to the Qawwali, in reference to the Ghazal. How can today's generation get to understand or know him a little bit?
See, unfortunately, not all of his works have been translated. That's one of the difficulties. So, if you want to learn about Amir Khusrau, you have to either know Persian or at least go through the translations. So, and very little contemporary kind of translation is available. For example, I would recommend one recent book. It's called In the Bazaar of Love. It's compiled by one professor, Sunil Sharma, who teaches Persian in Boston University, and Paul Lozensky. This book was published by Penguin, I think. You should start with that book because they have translated a lot of Khusro's poetry into English, and there's a very interesting introduction in that book which looks at the entire historical context. Besides that, there are some Hindi translations, there are some Urdu translations, very little English translations. So, I mean, you will have to really go through, if today's generation, they want to learn something about Amir Khusrau, they have to work hard. Yes, they have to make an effort.
I'm definitely going to get this book immediately.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Yousuf, for giving us a brief introduction and insight into Amir Khusrau's life and an artistic genius if ever there was one. And like I said, Delhi has a fascination, and I hope we've been able to touch a little bit in this episode. But thank you so much for coming on A Delhi Love and for sharing this with us.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Yousuf, for introducing us to Amir Khusrau, an artistic genius if ever there was one. Delhi has always been associated with spirituality, and some of its sacred vinaya can be attributed to the music Khusrau gave us. The Hindustani we speak also owes much to Khusrau, as do sargams and alaps. it would not be wrong to say that there would be no Delhi without Khusro. Let us endeavor to get to know this surprising man for all seasons for ourselves. Join us next time as we explore Delhi's hidden gems, people, places, and stories on Delhi Love, Ishq, Mohabbat, Pyar. I'm Yasmin Kidwai. Until next time.